A single mother was driving home through a brutal snowstorm when a shadow leapt into her headlights. A wounded German shepherd, limping, his fur streaked with blood. He wasn't running from danger, he was leading her straight into it. Following the trail through the blizzard, she found a young police officer half buried in the snow, his badge frozen to his chest, his lifeblood fading fast. And when she pressed her hand to his wound, he whispered 7 chilling words that would change her life forever. Don't trust the chief, he sent them. What this mother, her little girl, and the dying K9 uncover next will shatter a town's silence and prove that heroes don't always wear uniforms. Before we begin, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and leave a like. Your support truly keeps these stories of courage and hope alive. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts. The storm had turned Evergreen Valley into a frozen wilderness. Outside Seattle's city lights, the mountains were buried beneath a suffocating sea of snow. Wind screamed through the pines like something alive, clawing at rooftops and bending telephone poles until they groaned in protest. In the middle of that merciless night, a single pair of headlights cut through the white darkness. An old gray pickup truck crawling along the SR-20 highway. Inside sat Laura Bennett, 35, her shoulders tense, her gloved hands gripping the wheel so tightly the knuckles shone pale under the dashboard light. Laura wasn't just tired. She carried the weariness of someone who'd fought too many battles in her life. A veteran of 2 tours in the Middle East, she had learned to survive through silence and precision. Her brown hair, now streaked with early gray, was tied back beneath a wool cap. Her face was lean, weather-etched, with soft lines around her eyes that only appeared when she smiled, something that happened less these days. Since her husband's death 7 years ago, she had raised her daughter alone, working the night shift at a supermarket in nearby Burlington. Her truck rattled with every gust of wind, heater struggling to keep the cab warm. She whispered to herself, "Just 10 more miles, and I'll be home." Home, a small cabin on the edge of Lake Evergreen, where her 8-year-old daughter Sophie was likely curled up beneath a mountain of blankets, their cat snoring beside her sketchbooks. Sophie was a quiet child, with a heart too gentle for a world so cold. She loved drawing, filling page after page with animals and dreams, and she hated thunder. Laura thought of her now, the way Sophie's blue eyes always looked up when she promised, "I'll be back before midnight, sweetheart." The thought was her warmth in that icy tunnel of wind. Then, without warning, something leapt into her headlights, a blur of movement, dark against the snow. Laura slammed the brakes. The tires shrieked as the truck slid sideways on the icy road, stopping just short of the guardrail. Her chest heaved. Outside, in the cone of her headlights, stood a dog. A German shepherd, large and muscular but trembling, its fur matted with snow and streaked with blood. Its amber eyes locked on hers through the windshield, filled with an intelligence that went beyond fear. It was pleading. Laura's soldier instinct surged. She turned off the engine, grabbed her flashlight, and stepped out. The wind hit her like knives. The cold stung her cheeks and snow crunched under her boots as she slowly approached. "Hey there," she murmured, voice steady. "It's okay." The dog barked once, hoarse, weak, then turned and limped toward the tree line, leaving a crimson trail against the white. Something in its movement told her it wasn't fleeing. It was leading her. "Damn it," Laura whispered, scanning the road. Not a soul in sight. Just her, the storm, and this wounded creature. She followed. The forest swallowed her in seconds. The flashlight's beam danced through the flurry, revealing only flashes of branches, broken twigs, and the swirling snow that filled every gap between earth and sky. The dog paused ahead, looked back once to be sure she followed, then disappeared again behind a curtain of pine trunks. Laura moved faster, boots sinking ankle deep. The air tasted of iron and frost. Somewhere ahead came a sound, low, human, ragged. She stopped. "Hello?" she called out. Only the wind answered, whispering between the trees. Then, there it was again. A groan, followed by the faint crackle of a broken radio. Laura pressed forward until the beam of her flashlight struck something half buried beneath a fallen branch. A man. He was sprawled on his side, snow caking his uniform. The badge on his chest read, "Seattle Police Department." His skin was ghost pale, his lips blue, and his breath came in shallow, uneven gasps. The dog, The same wounded shepherd, pressed close to him, whining softly, its nose nudging his hand. "Oh, God!" Laura breathed. She dropped to her knees, brushed snow from the man's face, and saw how young he was, maybe 30, with short brown hair dusted white by frost and a light stubble along his jaw. Even under the bruises, he had a kind face. His nameplate read Ryan Cole. "Hang in there," Laura said, checking his pulse. Weak, but there. She pulled off one glove, pressed it against the wound blooming through his coat. Warm blood seeped between her fingers. "You're gonna be fine. Stay with me." His eyelids fluttered, pupils unfocused, and when he spoke, the words were barely audible. Not criminals." He coughed, the sound tearing through his chest. "Inside the force, don't trust the chief." His voice cracked into silence. Laura froze. The words hit harder than the cold. "Inside the force? Don't trust the chief?" She looked down at the shattered radio beside him, its wires sparking weakly before dying out. Then her gaze fell on the dog again. The shepherd, Hunter, was panting, its breath fogging the air. It looked at her with something that felt like comprehension, then back at Ryan, and let out a low whine that sounded almost like grief. "Hunter," she murmured, reading the tag on its collar. "You brought me here, didn't you?" The dog tilted its head slightly, tail trembling, then pressed its body against Ryan's side, as if to share its warmth. The loyalty in that simple act clawed at Laura's heart. She tore off her scarf, wadded it against Ryan's wound, and leaned closer, whispering, "You're not dying here, not tonight." She needed to move him. But how? He was at least 180 pounds, unconscious, and the snowstorm was thickening. The wind howled through the trees, and in its roar, Laura thought she heard something else. A faint mechanical hum, growing, louder. Headlights. She turned sharply, the beam of her flashlight catching on swirling flakes. Through the trees, a pair of lights flickered in the distance. Not her truck. These were higher, brighter, moving slowly along the road she'd just left. Relief flickered in her chest, then died as quickly as it came. Why would anyone be driving up here, in this weather, at this hour? Laura's instinct screamed again. She crouched lower, shielding the officer and the dog with her body. The lights drew closer, cutting through the storm like knives. A vehicle stopped somewhere up the road. Doors opened. She strained her ears. The sound of boots crunching snow. Male voices. Indistinct, but the tone was wrong. Not the frantic urgency of rescuers, but the calm, deliberate rhythm of people who already knew what they'd find. One of them called out something she couldn't catch, drowned by the wind. Hunter growled low, ears flattened, his body trembling not from cold, but from recognition. Laura's pulse quickened. Whoever these men were, they weren't here to help. She looked down at Ryan, still unconscious, then back toward the forest path leading to her truck. If she could carry him halfway, maybe she could drag him the rest. The footsteps stopped. Silence pressed in, heavy and electric. Then, crack. The sound of a branch snapping underfoot, far too close. Laura spun around, flashlight raised. The beam caught only snow and shadows. She turned back to Ryan, heart pounding. "Come on, soldier," she muttered, slipping her arms under his shoulders, heaving with all her strength. "You survived this long. You can survive a little more." The man didn't stir, but she felt the faintest movement of breath against her sleeve. That was enough. The storm screamed louder now, a wall of white swallowing the world. Behind her, the lights grew brighter, cutting through the trees until their glow danced across the snow around her boots. Someone shouted, "Over there!" Laura froze. The voice was sharp, commanding, the kind that belonged to someone used to being obeyed. She ducked behind a fallen log, dragging Ryan with her. Hunter crouched low beside them, his fur bristling. For a long moment, nothing but the storm moved. Then, a flashlight beam swept across the clearing, stopping just inches from where they hid. Laura held her breath. The light hovered, then slowly shifted away. A car door slammed, the engine revved, and the glow began to recede. She waited, counting the seconds until it vanished completely. Only when the last trace of light disappeared did she exhale. Her breath came out in visible clouds. She turned to Hunter, whispering, "You and I are getting him out of here." The dog's ears flicked. It gave a short bark, as if in agreement. Laura adjusted her grip, pushing herself upright despite the burn in her arms. The forest seemed endless, the snow blinding, but she fixed her eyes on the faint glow of her. A truck's headlights through the storm, one step at a time. Behind her, Hunter followed, limping but determined, his paws leaving prints beside hers, a trail that would soon vanish under the falling snow. As they neared the edge of the trees, the wind shifted. Somewhere behind them, a noise, faint but unmistakable, the crunch of boots again, closer this time. She turned, flashlight trembling slightly in her hand. And then the beam of another set of headlights burst through the trees, glaring white against the storm, flooding the clearing with light. Laura froze, her breath catching. Someone was coming. The light reflected off the ice in her eyes as she tightened her grip on the flashlight, ready for whatever, or whoever, was stepping out of that car. The snow swirled like ghosts around her as she whispered under her breath, "Not tonight." The wind howled like a living creature as Laura heaved Ryan's limp body into the passenger seat of her truck. Hunter, the wounded German shepherd, scrambled up beside him, leaving streaks of blood across the floor mat. The truck's engine groaned before catching, headlights cutting through the blizzard. Snow blasted against the windshield in white sheets, erasing the world beyond a few feet. The tires slid on ice as she fought the steering wheel, her breath fogging in quick bursts. "Stay with me, officer," she muttered, glancing at Ryan's pale face. "You're not dying in my truck." He didn't answer. His head lolled to the side, lips faintly blue, blood soaking through the scarf she had pressed to his wound. Hunter's ears flicked nervously as the truck bounced along the narrow mountain road toward Lake Evergreen. The dog's body trembled from exhaustion, yet his gaze never left his partner. The snow swallowed the sound of the world. Only the wipers squeaked in a slow, mournful rhythm. By the time Laura saw the faint orange glow of her cabin through the storm, her fingers were numb, and her mind had gone cold with calculation. The road had become invisible, the trees ghost-like silhouettes in the headlights. She pulled into the driveway, barely recognizable beneath a blanket of white, and slammed the truck into park. Hunter jumped down first, landing awkwardly, his paw dragging slightly. Laura rushed around, opened the passenger door, and with effort born of muscle memory, dragged Ryan out. Her boots slipped on the icy steps as she half-carried him to the porch. The front door banged open under her shoulder, the warmth of the fireplace she'd left burning earlier hitting her like a blessing. Inside, the cabin smelled faintly of pine wood and stew. The flickering fire painted the wooden walls gold and orange. She laid Ryan gently on the couch, the old cushions sagging beneath his weight. Her breath came in ragged bursts as she stripped off her gloves and unzipped his jacket. His uniform shirt was soaked crimson, the wound just below his shoulder blade oozing sluggishly now that the bleeding had slowed. She tore a clean towel from the linen drawer and pressed down, grimacing as he winced faintly. Under the firelight, she got her first good look at him. He couldn't have been older than 32, with short brown hair clumped by melted snow and a faint scar along his jaw. The kind soldiers and officers wore like quiet medals. His hands were calloused, his nails trimmed short, and despite his youth, there was something weary in his features, a man who had seen too much too soon. "Hang on, officer," she whispered, reaching for her medical kit. "You've already done your part, now let me do mine." The metallic smell of blood filled the room as she cleaned the wound with antiseptic. When she peeled back the torn fabric around the bullet hole, her eyes narrowed. The round was distinctive, a polished, hollow point with an unusual engraving, not random, not standard issue. She'd seen it before, years ago, when she'd been assigned to a joint task force with Seattle PD during her service. Those rounds came from the department's internal weapons cache. Only senior officers and SWAT captains had access. Her stomach sank. Whoever shot him wasn't some street criminal. It was someone in uniform. Behind her, a faint creak. Laura turned sharply. At the end of the short hallway stood Sophie. 8 years old, barefoot, her red wool pajamas wrinkled, her hair a golden mess from sleep. She clutched her sketchbook to her chest, blinking at the scene. Her eyes went first to the man on the couch, then to the massive dog sitting beside him, chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. "Mom," she whispered, "who were they?" Laura softened her tone. "Go back to bed, honey. It's just someone who got hurt." But Sophie didn't move. She stepped closer, small feet padding over the creaky floorboards. Hunter's head lifted. For a moment, his ears pricked, body tensing. But when Sophie stopped a few feet away and crouched, something changed. The tension drained from the dog's body. He sniffed the air, then pressed his muzzle against her small hand. Sophie smiled faintly and whispered, "You're safe now, okay? My mom's strong. She'll fix everything." Laura watched silently. For a child so shy, Sophie had a strange gift with animals, the kind that came from empathy, not experience. The dog, though wounded, wagged his tail once, then rested his head against her lap. Sophie looked up and said softly, "Mom, I think he's saying thank you." The fire crackled. Laura swallowed hard, forcing herself back to work. She checked Ryan's pockets for ID, pulling out his wallet, a folded photo of him with another officer, a woman with dark hair and a badge that read, "Detective Aaron Sloan." On the back, in fading ink, were the words, "For justice, no matter the cost." But it wasn't the photo that caught her attention. It was the small, blood-stained USB drive lodged beneath it. She hesitated, then plugged it into her old laptop sitting on the kitchen table. The computer hummed to life, its dim blue light casting long shadows across the cabin. The drive contained a folder titled Lang Reports. She clicked it open. Transaction records, coded documents, offshore accounts, each one linked to the same name, Chief Marcus Lang, Seattle PD. Her breath caught. Lang. She remembered that name. Years ago, during her service, Lang had been a liaison between the military and city law enforcement. Ambitious, charming, and ruthless. He had a reputation for cleaning up problems by making them disappear. She leaned back, rubbing her temples. "So that's it," she murmured. Ryan wasn't just shot, he was silenced. Hunter shifted beside the couch, ears twitching. Laura stood, returning to Ryan's side. His pulse was stronger now. She replaced the bloody towel with clean gauze and bandages, wrapping his chest carefully. The movement was mechanical, trained, but her mind was racing. She had a wounded cop in her cabin, evidence of corruption that could destroy a police chief, and a child asleep down the hall. She needed a plan. Then, the sound that made her blood run cold, the faint rumble of an engine outside. Her head snapped toward the window. The glow of headlights swept across the snow, growing brighter, closer. Hunter's ears perked. He rose unsteadily, a growl building low in his throat. Laura glanced at the clock. 3:17 a.m. No one sane would drive this mountain in a blizzard. "Mom?" Sophie's voice was barely a whisper. "Who's that?" Laura pressed a finger to her lips. "Stay quiet, sweetheart." She grabbed her pistol from the drawer, a relic from her army days, checked the magazine, and moved to the window. Through the frost, she saw a dark SUV idling in the driveway, its engine purring. Two silhouettes inside. The driver stepped out first, tall, heavy-set, wearing a black parka with no badge. The other followed, scanning the cabin with a flashlight. A voice called out, muffled through the storm. "Open up! Police! We need to check on the residents!" Laura's pulse hammered. No patrol would come this far from town in a storm, not without a radio call. She turned off the lamps, motioned for Sophie to hide behind the wood stove. Hunter crept toward the door, his growl now a rumble deep in his chest. "Mom," Sophie whispered, clutching her sketchbook. "They're police, right? They'll help?" Laura knelt beside her, her voice low, trembling but steady. "I don't know anymore, sweetheart." A beam of light sliced across the curtains, pausing right where she knelt. A hand banged on the door again, harder this time. "Open up! This is the Seattle Police Department." Laura's mind raced. If they truly were police, they could identify themselves properly, with rank, with names, but they hadn't. And Ryan's broken whisper echoed in her head. "Don't trust the chief." She glanced at Ryan's unconscious face, then at Hunter, who stood tense, ready. She reached for the pistol's safety, flicked it off. Outside, the voices grew impatient. "We know you're in there, ma'am. Open up or we come in." Laura drew a slow breath, steeling herself. She whispered to Hunter, "If they try the door, stay low." The dog's golden eyes met hers in silent understanding. The next second, the doorknob rattled. Then, bang! A heavy thud as someone rammed the porch steps. Sophie gasped, clapping her small hand over her mouth. The fire hissed as a gust of icy air slipped through the window frame. Laura stood between the door and her daughter, gun raised, heart pounding like the storm itself. The knocking stopped. Silence stretched, unnatural, heavy. Then a voice, calm and cold, spoke from just beyond the door. "Ma'am, we just want to talk." Laura's eyes narrowed. The tone was too smooth, too rehearsed, the kind used by men who already knew what they'd find. She tightened her grip on the gun. "Yeah," she muttered under her breath. "Then start talking." For a long moment, only the sound of the wind filled the cabin, that eerie, whistling sound that seemed to creep through the walls. Laura pressed her back against the doorframe, her heart pounding so loud she could feel it echo in her throat. She flicked off the last lamp, plunging the cabin into a suffocating half-darkness, lit only by the glow of dying embers in the fireplace. The shadows stretched across the wooden floor like claws. She turned to Sophie, whose wide blue eyes glistened in the faint firelight. "In the cupboard, sweetheart," Laura whispered. "Don't make a sound." Sophie hesitated, hugging her sketchbook to her chest, but the fear in her mother's eyes made her obey. She climbed inside the narrow pantry and crouched low among old blankets and canned food, clutching the dog's tag she'd found earlier, a token of courage. Outside, the snow crunched. Heavy boots, slow and deliberate, approached the front porch. Laura peered through the sliver of curtain. Two men stood in the storm, the headlights of their SUV painting halos of mist around their figures. They wore police uniforms, dark navy, matching the Seattle PD cut. But something was wrong. No badges, no name tags. The shorter one, stocky with a weathered face, spoke into a radio clipped to his vest. His voice carried faintly through the blizzard. "Target confirmed, cabin north of the lake, awaiting orders from Lang." The name sent a jolt through Laura's chest. Marcus Lang, the police chief Ryan had warned her about. Her pulse quickened. They weren't here to help. They were here to finish what had started on that highway. The taller man, built like a linebacker with a shaved head and a jagged scar running from temple to jaw, circled toward the window, his flashlight sweeping over the porch. His breath came out in white clouds, his eyes cold and calculating. Laura could tell from the way he moved, quiet, trained, professional, that he'd done this before. Ryan stirred on the couch, letting out a soft groan. Laura was beside him in an instant, pressing a finger to his lips. "Quiet," she mouthed. His eyes fluttered open, confused, until he saw the silhouette through the window. The realization hit him fast. He tried to sit up, but pain arched his back. "They found us," he rasped. "Yeah," Laura said, voice low and sharp. "And they're not knocking for coffee." Hunter stood near the door, his golden eyes fixed on the shapes outside. He growled deep in his chest, a low, vibrating sound that made the air seem heavier. The fur along his spine bristled, his body tense despite the bandage that wrapped his ribs. The dog wasn't just ready to fight, he was ready to protect. Laura moved fast. She opened the gas line to the fireplace, struck a match, and tossed it inside. The flames roared to life, thick smoke curling upward. It spread fast, billowing through the room until it fogged the windows, turning the cabin into a blur from outside. She slung Ryan's arm over her shoulder, his weight dragging against her, and jerked her head toward the back door. "We move now." Sophie's eyes peeked from the cupboard, terrified. Laura knelt for half a heartbeat, cupping her daughter's face. "You stay close to me, no matter what. Do you understand?" Sophie nodded, trembling. Outside, the knock came again, louder this time, followed by the voice of the man with the scar. "Open up, ma'am. Seattle PD. We need to ask you a few questions." Laura didn't answer. She guided Ryan toward the back door, Hunter padding close. They slipped into the white night, snow biting at their faces. Behind them, the front door handle rattled, then the crack of splintering wood. They were breaking in. The storm swallowed them whole. The truck sat half buried in drifts, the windshield frosted over. Laura threw open the driver's door, shoved Ryan inside, and jumped in after him. Hunter leaped into the back seat, barking sharply. The engine coughed once, then roared to life. "Hold on," Laura said, slamming the gas. The tires spun, digging into the snow before catching traction. The truck surged forward just as gunfire erupted behind them. The rear window shattered, glass raining over Ryan's legs. Sophie screamed. Down, Laura shouted, swerving hard. The headlights cut through the white darkness like a blade, and for a moment all sound vanished, but the engine's roar and her own breathing. Keep your head down, sweetheart, she said, forcing calm into her voice. Ryan's trembling hand found his pistol on the dashboard. He rolled down the window, ignoring the pain that flashed through his body, and fired twice into the storm. The muzzle flashes lit the night, brief, bright stars swallowed by snow. The SUV's headlights wavered behind them, still chasing. Hunter barked furiously. His body braced against the seat as Laura turned sharply along the ridge road. The path wound along a cliffside, steep drops disappearing into darkness. She knew this mountain. She'd driven it countless times, but never with death so close behind. We can't outrun them, Ryan muttered, his voice weak. Watch me, Laura said through clenched teeth. The truck skidded into a narrow curve. A shot rang out, the side mirror exploding in sparks. Laura jerked the wheel, the vehicle fishtailing dangerously close to the edge. Sophie whimpered from the floorboard, clutching Hunter's paw. Then, just ahead, the road split. One path leading uphill toward a frozen overlook, the other down into a ravine. Laura took the incline, tires screaming as they clawed for grip. The SUV behind followed, its sirens flashing red and blue through the storm like demonic eyes. As they reached the crest, Laura saw it. A hairpin turn bordered by a steep drop into a canyon of white. "Hold tight!" she shouted. She slammed the brakes, yanked the wheel, and spun the truck, sideways. The pursuing SUV hit the curve too fast. Its lights swerved, skidding across the icy road, then plunged over the edge. A fiery orange burst lit up the storm as the explosion echoed through the valley. Laura's truck stopped inches from the cliff. Silence followed, broken only by the wind. Ryan exhaled shakily. "You could have warned me," he groaned. "Would you have listened?" she shot back. But the relief lasted only seconds. In the rearview mirror, through the smoke and snow, she saw movement. A single figure crawling from the burning wreckage. A man in a half-burned uniform, limping, face smeared with blood and soot. Laura squinted. Recognition punched her gut. "Oh my God!" Ryan followed her gaze. His eyes widened. "That's Lieutenant Hale." Hale, she knew that name. Years ago, he'd been her commanding officer during her second tour in Afghanistan. A disciplined soldier with ice-blue eyes and a reputation for loyalty that bordered on fanaticism. She had once respected him, until he'd covered up an incident that cost 3 civilians their lives. Seeing him now, alive and crawling from the wreck, twisted something deep inside her. Ryan's voice came low, grim. "Lang's got people everywhere, even the ones you used to trust." Laura looked away, pressing her foot on the gas. "Then we keep moving." They drove until the storm softened to a whisper, the sky lightening with the faint gray of pre-dawn. The mountain road ended near an old industrial site, a cluster of rusted warehouses half swallowed by snow. Laura pulled into one of them, the massive metal door screeching as it closed behind them. The truck engine ticked softly in the cold silence. Inside, the air smelled of oil and rust. Broken machinery lay scattered under dust. Laura helped Ryan out of the truck, settling him against a pile of old crates. Sophie curled up beside Hunter, who lowered himself next to her protectively, his head resting on her knee. Ryan looked up at Laura, his eyes heavy but alert. "You didn't have to save me," he said quietly. Laura crouched beside him, brushing the snow from her jacket. "Yes, I did. My daughter was asleep 2 rooms away. You brought the storm to my door. I don't get to ignore that." He managed a faint smile. "You sound like someone who used to wear a badge." "Close," she said, tightening the bandage on his shoulder. "I used to wear a uniform." The firelight from a small lantern flickered between them. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Hunter's ears pricked. He growled, low and deep. Laura turned just in time to see it, a red glint moving across the far wall. A laser sight. Someone was outside. "Get down!" she hissed. She lunged for Sophie, pulling her to the floor. A shot cracked through the window, shattering glass. Sparks burst from the metal beam beside them. Hunter barked, teeth bared, as Ryan grabbed his gun, aiming toward the darkness. Beyond the door, snow drifted through the broken glass, melting on the wooden floor as another shot rang out. Laura's heartbeat thundered in her ears. She whispered to Sophie, her voice trembling but calm. "If anything happens, you run. You hear me? Run." The night answered with gunfire. The storm had eased by morning, leaving the city of Seattle glazed in ice that glimmered like shattered glass under a pale sun. The roads were slick and quiet, the air holding that brittle chill that made every breath sting. Laura Bennett's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as she guided her truck through the industrial district on the city's south side. The area had long been abandoned. Rows of rusted warehouses, broken cranes, and graffiti-covered containers stretched into the mist. She knew this place. It had once been a military supply depot before falling into decay. Now, it was a perfect hideout. Ryan Cole sat in the passenger seat, pale and sweating beneath his blood-stained bandages. His uniform, once pristine, was now torn and stiff from dried blood. Despite the pain twisting through his body, his eyes stayed sharp, flicking to the side mirrors every few seconds. Hunter, the black and tan German shepherd, rested in the back seat. His breathing was steady but shallow, and every so often, his ears twitched toward the faint rumble of traffic in the distance. As Laura parked behind an old warehouse with broken windows, she took a deep breath, forcing calm into her voice. "We're here," she whispered. She reached over, resting a hand gently on Ryan's arm. "He's a friend, someone I can trust." Inside the warehouse, the air was cold and smelled faintly of rust and oil. A man emerged from behind a stack of crates, a tall figure in his late 30s, his posture disciplined but relaxed. Ethan Rivera had the look of someone who had seen too much and learned not to flinch. His olive skin bore faint scars near the temple, remnants of shrapnel from his years as a special ops technician overseas. His hair was dark and unkempt, and a faint shadow of stubble covered his jaw. "Laura Bennett," he said with a half-smile, voice deep and calm, though his sharp gray eyes immediately assessed Ryan's condition. "It's been a long time." "Not long enough," Laura replied, her voice carrying both relief and exhaustion. Ethan's smile faded as his gaze moved to the officer slumped in the chair she'd guided him to. "Seattle PD," he muttered. "You really know how to pick your company." Ryan gave a weak smirk. "Not by choice." Laura quickly filled Ethan in, about the ambush, the storm, and the USB drive she had found covered in blood. Ethan listened without interrupting, crossing his arms, the muscles in his jaw tightening. "You brought me a live bomb," he finally said. "If what you're saying is true, Marcus Lang isn't just corrupt. He's sitting on a weapons network that reaches past the state line. I need the data decrypted," Laura said. "Whatever's on that drive is worth killing for." Ethan exhaled slowly and gestured toward his laptop setup on a steel table cluttered with wires and hard drives. "Let's see what the devil looks like in binary." While he worked, Laura checked on Ryan. His breathing had grown ragged. "You need a hospital," she said, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. Ryan shook his head. "No hospitals. Lang's men monitor every emergency intake. I'll be dead before I reach the door." His fingers tightened weakly around hers. "If you turn that drive over to the Bureau without protection, they'll kill you and Sophie before it hits their servers." Laura met his gaze, unwavering. "I didn't survive Fallujah to die, afraid in my own country," she said softly. "We're seeing this through." Ethan's fingers danced across the keyboard, lines of code reflecting in his eyes. "Got it?" he murmured, the screen filled with spreadsheets and encrypted messages, but one folder stood out. Raven Trade, Auth, M. Lang. Ethan clicked it open. Inside were transaction records, dates, account numbers, and digital signatures linking Lang to an arms cartel operating out of Sinaloa, Mexico. "Jesus," Ethan whispered. "He's been laundering money through police department accounts, using evidence rooms as exchange points. This isn't small-time corruption. This is organized warfare." Laura felt her stomach drop. "He's been selling weapons out of our own armory." Ryan's head lifted weakly. "That's why he wanted me dead. I was tracing transfers, found one that didn't add up. Next thing I knew, my partner got reassigned, and I was ambushed." His voice cracked. Lang's turned the force into his personal army. The realization hung heavy in the cold air. Meanwhile, across town, Sophie sat with a steaming cup of cocoa in a small diner near the docks. Her mother had told her to stay inside while she talked to an old friend. The little girl had her sketchbook open, her tongue caught between her teeth as she drew. Her favorite red coat, bright even under the dull light, was draped over her chair. The drawing was simple but heartfelt. Her mother standing strong beside a police officer and a big dog in the snow, all three surrounded by falling flakes shaped like hearts. As she and Hunter had escaped the cabin the night before, she'd whispered a promise to herself, "We'll be okay. Mom always finds a way." When Laura returned to the diner an hour later, Sophie was gone. Panic seized her chest until she spotted the waitress, a soft-faced woman in her 50s with kind eyes, holding Sophie's hand. "She just stepped out to look at the snow," the woman said with a smile. Laura thanked her, but as she turned, she noticed the sketchbook lying forgotten on the counter. She opened it and froze. Sophie's drawing clearly showed Ryan's police badge and uniform. Across the street, a woman paused mid-step as a gust of wind caught the sketch, flipping it open. She was in her late 50s, short and sturdy, her silver-gray hair neatly tied into a bun beneath her wool hat. Her coat bore a faded police department pin. Her name was Clara Jensen, a longtime receptionist at the Seattle PD, though few knew she had quietly fed information to the FBI for years. Clara's husband had once been a detective, killed under suspicious circumstances in a training accident that Lang had personally overseen. She never stopped looking for the truth. When she saw the drawing, her heart skipped. "Ryan Cole," she whispered. "He's alive." Without hesitation, she pulled out her phone and dialed a number she hadn't used in months. "Agent Grayson," she said, "you need to hear this." Back at the warehouse, Ethan's phone buzzed. The message was short, sent from an unknown number. "I know where you're hiding him. Don't go home." Beneath the text was a photo, the cabin near Evergreen Lake, surrounded by police vehicles. Laura's blood ran cold. "They found it." Ethan looked up sharply. "Lang must have traced your truck. We need to move, now." Before they could react, Hunter's ears perked and he began to growl, low and deep. His fur bristled along his spine. A faint rumble echoed outside, the unmistakable sound of approaching engines. Ryan tried to stand, grimacing in pain. "They're here," he rasped. Laura grabbed her rifle from the table, her body moving on instinct. "Ethan, get Sophie." Hunter barked once, sharp and warning, positioning himself between the doorway and the others. The dog's eyes blazed with the same defiance Laura had seen on the battlefield, a refusal to surrender. Outside, the sound of car doors slamming echoed through the still air. Laura glanced through the window. Dark SUVs surrounded the warehouse, their headlights cutting through the fog. Ethan swore under his breath. "We're boxed in." Laura checked her weapon, steadying her breath. "Then we fight our way out." As the first flashbang shattered the night, Hunter lunged toward the entrance, barking ferociously. Ryan pulled himself upright beside Laura, his voice hoarse but unbroken. "No matter what happens," he said, "get Sophie out alive." Laura's eyes burned with tears she didn't have time to shed. "We all walk out of here," she whispered. "All of us." Outside, the engines roared louder, then stopped. Silence fell for a brief, electric second before the sound of boots crunched on gravel. The war had found them again. The night bled slowly into morning, the first gray light crawling over Seattle's skyline like a hesitant promise. The storm had long passed, but the city itself seemed to hold its breath, as if it knew something was about to change. Inside the FBI's Seattle field office, the air was electric. Agents in tactical gear gathered around a large digital map glowing on the wall. At the center stood Special Agent Michael Grayson, a man in his early 40s with sharp features, salt and pepper hair cropped close, and eyes that carried the calm authority of someone who had stared chaos in the face and refused to blink. He'd been with the Bureau for nearly 2 decades, known for his meticulous mind and unshakable moral compass, traits forged after losing his younger brother to police corruption 15 years ago. Across the table, Clara Jensen sat upright, her posture tense but steady. Her gray hair framed a face etched by years of quiet endurance. She had spent half her life behind a reception desk at Seattle PD, watching men like Marcus Lang climb to power while honest officers disappeared. Her hands trembled slightly as she slid the encrypted USB across the table. "Everything you need is in there," she said, voice low but fierce. Transaction logs, internal comms, even audio files Lang didn't know were recorded. If you move fast, you can catch him before he wipes it clean. Grayson nodded. You did the right thing, Clara. He placed a reassuring hand on hers, then turned to his team. Lang's staging a false raid at the industrial district near Pier 47 at dawn. He's using the operation as a cover to execute witnesses and destroy evidence. We move before he does. Within the hour, the city awoke to the thunder of helicopters. Black SUVs fanned out across the frozen docks, their lights muted, engines low. The tactical team deployed in silence, shadows blending with fog. Laura, Ryan, Sophie, Ethan, and Hunter waited in the far corner of the derelict factory complex, huddled behind a wall of rusted steel crates. Ryan leaned against the concrete, his face pale under the weak sunrise, his arms still wrapped in bandages. Laura crouched beside him, checking the magazine of her sidearm with the precision of habit. Ethan worked his tablet, watching the FBI comms feed flicker. They're in position, he murmured. We've got a 3-minute window before Lang realizes he's not alone. Ryan looked up, grimacing. Lang won't come quietly. He doesn't have to, Laura said, tightening her gloves. He just has to fall. Hunter sat alert beside them, the faint morning light catching the gold in his fur. His body had healed remarkably, though one paw still dragged slightly, a reminder of the night he'd nearly died on that snowy road. He stared toward the factory's main entrance, ears flicking at every sound. Beside him, Sophie knelt, wrapping her small arms around his neck. You're my hero, Hunter, she whispered. The dog responded with a low rumble of affection, pressing his head against her shoulder. From the distance came the rumble of engines. A convoy of black vehicles rolled through the gates, snow crunching under their tires. The lead car stopped, and Chief Marcus Lang stepped out. Tall, broad-shouldered, his uniform immaculate beneath a dark overcoat, he looked every bit the image of law and authority, except for the hard gleam in his eyes. His slicked-back hair glistened with frost as he surveyed the warehouse, barking orders into his radio. No survivors? Burn the place if you have to. Laura's jaw clenched. She'd seen that expression before, not in a city, but on men who commanded death with a single word. Ryan shifted, whispering, There he is, the devil in dress blues. Lang's men, about a dozen of them, moved in formation toward the building. They wore tactical armor marked with fake FBI insignia. Laura's heart pounded. They're disguised as federal agents, she realized. Not for long, Ethan muttered, flipping a switch on his comm. From above, the deep chop of rotors sliced the air. Floodlights pierced the fog as 2 black helicopters appeared overhead. Lang's men froze, momentarily blinded by the sudden brilliance. Then a voice boomed through a loudspeaker, strong, commanding. FBI, drop your weapons and stand down! Lang spun, fury twisting his features. They found us, he roared, drawing his gun. Take them out. No one walks away. Chaos erupted. Bullets tore through the air. Glass shattered. Alarms wailed. Laura ducked behind a crate, returning fire with clean, controlled shots. Ryan, though weak, pulled his weapon and fired from the opposite flank. Ethan covered Sophie, dragging her behind a stack of barrels. Hunter lunged forward, barking furiously, his muscles coiling with instinct. Lang advanced through the gunfire, his face contorted with rage. He saw Laura darting toward cover and raised his weapon. End of the line, soldier, he sneered. Before he could shoot, a blur of black and gold slammed into him. Hunter. The dog hit with full force, teeth clamping down on Lang's wrist. The gun fired, the bullet slicing past Laura's ear. Lang screamed, twisting as Hunter dragged him to the ground. Get off me, you mutt, he shouted, trying to aim again. Laura moved fast, diving forward, kicking the weapon from his grasp. It skidded across the floor, just as Ryan fired a single, precise shot. The bullet struck Lang's shoulder, spinning him backward. He fell hard, clutching his arm as FBI agents swarmed the scene. Grayson strode through the chaos, his coat flapping in the wind, voice ringing out. Marcus Lang, you're under arrest for conspiracy, corruption, and murder of federal officers. The chief's defiance crumbled. He glared up at them, face pale with shock, before agents pulled him to his feet and snapped cold steel, all around his wrists. For the first time in years, silence reclaimed the factory. Not the silence of fear, but of justice fulfilled. Then Ryan collapsed, the color drained from his face as blood spread across his chest. Laura dropped beside him instantly. "Stay with me, Ryan," she pleaded, pressing her hand against his wound. "You promised to teach Sophie how to use a bow, remember?" He smiled weakly, eyes half closed. If you promise to go on that walk with me after this," he whispered. Laura let out a shaky laugh, tears blurring her vision. "It's a date." His fingers brushed hers before he drifted into unconsciousness, but his breathing stayed steady. A month later, the world had changed. The headlines screamed of betrayal and heroism. Marcus Lang was convicted on 17 counts of corruption, facing life without parole. The city he had poisoned began to breathe again. On a mild spring afternoon, the Bennett cabin by Evergreen Lake basked in the soft glow of sunset. The snow was gone now, replaced by the shimmer of rippling water. The air smelled of pine and thawing earth. Hunter trotted along the shoreline, his coat gleaming, a silver medal hanging from his collar. The Medal of Canine Valor, awarded by the FBI. Sophie ran beside him, laughing, her red coat fluttering like a flag in the wind. Laura stood on the porch, a blue wool sweater hugging her frame, her hair loose for the first time in months. She felt peace, not the absence of fear, but the presence of something stronger. She turned at the sound of footsteps behind her. Ryan approached, still bandaged but walking tall. The late sunlight caught the faint smile on his lips. In his hands was a small bouquet of wildflowers, uneven, humble, beautiful. "Didn't think I'd ever find peace in the middle of a war," he said softly. "Then I met you." Laura turned, smiling through the golden light. "You know," she said, her voice tender, "I think I forgot how to love, until that night in the snow." Before he could reply, Sophie's voice rang across the yard. "Mom! Hunter found a heart-shaped stone!" They both laughed. Ryan slipped an arm around Laura's shoulders, pulling her close as the last rays of daylight spilled across the lake. Hunter lay down at their feet, tail wagging, the metal catching the light like fire. The water shimmered gold and crimson beneath the setting sun, a reflection of everything they had survived. Sometimes, Laura thought, love doesn't begin with a promise. It begins with survival, with two hearts still beating in the aftermath of the storm. And in that survival, she whispered to herself, we found forever. Sometimes, miracles don't appear as sudden flashes of light or voices from heaven. They arrive quietly, in the shape of a loyal dog, a brave mother, or a moment when hope refuses to die. What happened to Laura, Ryan, Sophie, and Hunter reminds us that even when the world feels dark and cruel, God still works through courage, kindness, and faith. He sends his angels in unexpected forms, not with wings but with hearts that never give up. Each day we walk past ordinary miracles, the neighbor who helps without being asked, the child who forgives, the animal who saves a life, the stranger who chooses compassion instead of judgment. These are the fingerprints of God, scattered through our lives, waiting for us to notice. If you believe that faith and love can still bring light into the darkest night, take a moment to share this story with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Let's see how far this story of courage and redemption can travel. And if your heart was touched, type Amen in the comments as a prayer for peace, for healing, and for the unseen miracles still waiting to find us. May God bless you and your loved ones wherever you are. Remember, miracles still walk on 4 legs. Speak through love and live in every act of faith. Don't forget to share, subscribe, and keep believing, because hope never truly dies.